You're all boring, Was I never wild,
Alarm goes 2 a.m. and the first thing I do is go into the bathroom and stare into this 10,000 lux thing right into it.
If I spontaneously combust, I'll know it's down to you.
From there, it's quite natural to say, you know what, take this, you sucker.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the F1 show, sponsored by Audi. So much to get into today. We'll do that with the help of Ted Kravitz and the 2016 world champion, Nico Rosberg, making his podcast debut. Hello to you both. Yeah, we've got Norris's latest error under pressure. Mercedes 1-3. In Montreal as we review the Canadian Grand Prix. George Russell's no-nonsense attitude. We'll have a look at the Red Bull protest that was to no avail. We'll get Ted's F1 movie review, and we'll even hopefully have time to discuss Luca De Meo leaving as CEO of the Renault Group and see where that leaves Alpine, a struggling Alpine team. Nico, fresh back off the plane. Quite an enjoyable Montreal weekend, wasn't it? Should we start with McLaren and everything that happened there? What did you make of Lando's weekend in particular? Because once again, it feels like we're talking about the same thing. He was really good in practice. Pressure came on in qualifying. Didn't work out from there. And then he was chasing his tail and made the error in the end.
Yeah, so it was lovely to be out in Canada with you guys. It was an interesting weekend because not everything went as expected. There was some unexpected performances and all that, which is always good if things mix up. So it was great to see Mercedes hit the front. That was awesome. Some fresh air there. And then, Lando, as you mentioned, it's been his Achilles heel this year, hasn't it? His mental fragility, his doubts, and they came to the fore again now in Montreal. It's just when the pressure is highest, there's these little mistakes that creep in, and they crept in qualifying, where in Q3, he made two major mistakes on his two important laps, which meant he only had 7th place on the grid with one of the fastest cars. So that was difficult. And then obviously also in the race, in the heat of the moment, in the most critical moment where he was trying to pass his championship rival, he did a very strange misjudgment, like just driving right into the back of him.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was one of those weekends, wasn't it? I mean, we've seen it so often, but I think they weren't particularly overly confident. It wasn't necessarily a McLaren track, was it, Ted? I mean, they kind of tend to suit the ones where they're working the tyres harder, faster corners. This is long, straight, short radiuses. So they still saw flashes of pace from them, but I think if ever there was a track in the last few that was going to be a weakness for them, it was this one. But that doesn't excuse it, I suppose, from Lando's perspective. He said it was stupid. He called it out himself. He was self-flagellating again, wasn't he? And it's never nice to see that. And of course, he was leading the championship by 23 points after the first race in Australia. He's now 22 points behind Oscar Piastri. That's a big swing.
Yeah, the funny thing for me, hello Simon, hello Nico, hello everybody, by the way. The funny thing for me is that Andrea Stella had already called it damage limitation weekend on Saturday. So there was nobody in any doubt in the McLaren camp as to what really the point of the weekend was, which was just to score as many points as possible, get away with whatever they could do. And then when Oscar goes and gets overtaken by Kimi Antonelli at the start, it becomes even more like damage limitation. They didn't look like getting past Antonelli, all right, it was bubbling up quite nicely towards the end. And then they decide not only to have this fight between themselves over 4th place, really, but then push it so hard in the case of Lando that he makes a misjudgment. So that was weird for me. And I think what Andrea Stella means when he says, we're going to have a discussion about it is, okay, what was the point of pushing it too hard? Was the intention just that Lando, after winning Monaco, but then not winning Spain, wanted to make a point about the championship to Oscar and thought, look, even though this is 4th place, I need to have this off you, or whether it's just racing. I mean, obviously it was just racing. And then I think the outcome, which is going to be that Stella's going to say, who is not a man to be crossed, Andrea Stella, or a man to annoy, I think we need to give each other a bit more racing room. And I suppose the only positive thing you can say about it is that better they were fighting over fourth and fifth, and it was only 10 points lost for Lando, could have been many more for Oscar. Better now than if they were fighting over first and second. I think then we'd have a bit more of a thing on our hands, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 175 points, Nico, is their lead in the constructors. So I suppose they've given themselves the luxury, right, of being able to employ papaya rules. But the rules of papaya engagement, it would seem, is that, yeah, you can race and you can race hard, but you can't crash into each other. And Lando broke that. The gap was not there, right? And he's apologized to the team. But I'm interested to get your thoughts on this one, because if you contrast it with where George is, and I feel like George has got this no nonsense, take no prisoners attitude these days. Whereas Lando is clearly struggling up top. Now, I know for a fact that George has used a sports psychologist, and I think you've told me in the past that you've used one. Maybe I'm right in saying that, or am I wrong? You tell me. But it strikes me that when he's being coached over the radio by his race engineer, Will Joseph, in both qualifying and a little bit in the race, and you think it's mental errors that he's making, is this the kind of thing that maybe he should be looking into? And maybe he is. We just haven't heard about it yet.
So Lando, just like I was, is a little bit more of a sensitive person, and you have a little bit more self-doubts. You're a little bit you're a little bit more insecure, and that's just the way we are and the way he is, which can also be a strength, because that's the kind of person who will question himself more, will work more on himself rather than the overly confident, yeah, I'm the greatest in the world, who mostly attributes blame to other people and doesn't question himself as much. But of course is more solid in his head. So there's like pros and cons. But of course the sensitive people, they are more scared and have more going on in their heads. there's a lot going on out there. So there's the chance to improve your mental performance if you work on it. And I actually work with my psychologist 2 hours every 2 days in the winter, the whole winter period, and then during the season as well. And it was extremely intense, harder than actually the physical workouts. But it gave me so much, for the racing, for life, because you learn lifestyle design, right? We hear Lando eliminating Instagram. That's one part of the puzzle, because Instagram and all those negative comments consumes you. It completely eats you up. So deleting that, perfect, very good step. And there's 15 other steps you can make. It's all about how much do I go clubbing and drinking alcohol? How much do I read the news? Because Instagram is just one part. How much do I read the news? How much time do I spend in relaxed atmosphere with my best friends and family? It's all part of lifestyle design, all the way to, I even worked with a Harvard sleep professor to eliminate jet lag completely. There was no jet lag. And that's another tiny little bit that in the heat of the moment, in the biggest pressure moments, if you do a whole season of F1 with zero jet lag, you will be that ever so slightly fresher, and that might eliminate one of those fundamental mistakes. And that's really something that Lando hopefully should be digging into, working on. And we've seen elements of that, because the other one was just, as you said, now his engineer is starting to take on the role of a psychologist. And the engineer was saying in the race, Lando, let's reset. He said in the heat of the moment in qualifying, he came on the radio to Lando, reset your mental state now. And he told him what to focus on, Lando, don't focus on braking as late as possible, because they saw the creeping in again of him exaggerating out on track, him wanting too much, which first you see that first in braking points. When drivers start braking way too late everywhere, it's just drivers wanting too much. So the engineer was telling him, Lando, reset. Lando, focus on your lines in the corners. That's what you need to get right, and not braking as late as possible. So you saw him taking the role of psychologist there. And that's all. If that's something that was pre-discussed, then it's something very nice. If it's just resulting from the team being worried or something, then it's not so great, because then it's not so helpful to Lando. It needs to be Lando agreeing to all of this and implementing, because it can only come from him.
It's a very interesting point that you raised there. I remember talking to Matt Bishop, former head of comms at McLaren recently, and then latterly at Aston Martin. Now he's kind of freelance, and he said, don't ever think that drivers don't Google themselves or stick their name into Twitter or follow all these comments on Instagram. And they are fragile, and it affects them when they go into these team meetings afterwards and debriefs. And if they're thinking about this, it can cost them lap time. But I know that you reached out to Lando, didn't you, Nico? You slipped into his DMs last year with regards to Instagram, and you said, "Look, I'm here to help. I've been through this myself." Have you done that this year? Have you got anything back from him? Would you consider consulting him to help him?
No, I'm always ready to help the young drivers whenever someone will reach out. No problem, with pleasure. Just in Lando's case specifically, I've just been through exactly what he's going through, or very comparable, and that's why. And I turned it around successfully because I won in the end. So I'm really like so well positioned to be able to discuss something like that. And that's the only reason why I just reached out and I just said, hey, if ever you want to speak, I'm available there. Yeah, no problem.
I mean, two things. Firstly, in Lando's defense, he was quicker in that part of the race, and he was going for it, and he'd sort of teased Oscar up at the braking for the last chicane, let him go first, and had a run on him. And had it turned out, had it worked out, he would have been past Oscar. He would have been put fourth place, and we would have all thought he was a hero. So, but yes, I agree with you totally on the qualifying stuff, Nico. How do you cure jet lag? Just incidentally, before I forget, because somebody who didn't go to bed until 2 a.m. last night and had to have a nap after I dropped the kids off at school this morning, I'd like to know.
First of all, Ted, how can you not agree with me in the race? You said you agree with me in qualifying, but you have to agree also in the race that it was of course he did an amazing job until then, but then when it counted, it was just a mistake that really was so strange, because to us it was like that overtake, that the end result with the crash, there was no gap there. So it's a bit strange to like full gas, pedal to the metal, try and go there in the first place.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not a racing driver, but had it worked out, he would have looked amazing. It's just that it didn't work out, and it was a little mistake. And I think maybe just in it, I'm just trying to see things from Lando's point of view, and maybe it was like, it's going great, it's going great, it's going great. Oh no, it's happened again, and he doesn't. Maybe it's not a mental thing at that point. It was just a sort of misjudgment, which is what he said at the time.
Okay. Anyways, I'm also a big Lando fan, by the way, because he's enormously talented and probably one of the most talented out there. And he was my absolute favorite for the championship as well. It's just he's.
Have you changed that, Nico? Now?
Yeah, so it's in Canada that I changed that. In Canada, Oscar Piastri is now my favorite for the championship, because Lando has not yet been able to iron out these regular mistakes, and that's at the moment what would cost him from winning the championship. And I don't see him ironing out them at the moment. And we have to remember also, it's a new situation that they have never been in before. It's so different. It's so extremely different whether you're fighting for fourth place, fifth place, eighth place, or even whether you're for the first time the underdog, hunting the greatest of this generation, Max Verstappen, who is on to win his fourth championship, because Lando took that role last year. He was suddenly hunting him for a possible driver's version. But even in there, your pressure situation is just so different. When you suddenly go into a season and you're the absolute like huge favorite to win the drivers' championship, you have the car to win every single race. That's like a 10x difference in pressure. And that's what these drivers, Lando and Oscar, are now facing. And that has caused, from my point of view, that's what's caused the kind of shift where Lando was the dominant driver last year, and now Oscar has moved ahead. And it's, for me, from my point of view, is just this pressure situation that has changed the dynamic. Let me move on to your question, Ted, with the jet lag. So what I did was, which is not really realistic for you to do, Ted, because it doesn't make sense to go so extreme. But when I would fly to Australia, 5 days before, Australia is a 10-hour difference. So I believe 4 days before leaving to Australia, it's maximum 1.5 hours per day shift that you're allowed to do. if you want to avoid jet lag. So 4 days before leaving, Australia is ahead. So you have to wake up earlier leaving in Monaco. So the day one, it would be 6 o'clock wake up. The next day it would be 4:30 wake up. And the next day would be 3 o'clock wake up. And then the last one would be 1:30 wake up. I think I did 2 o'clock wake up. And by 2:33, you would see me out on the street running. I was jogging. I did my morning exercise session, 3 o'clock in the morning in Monaco. And then when of course I also have to go to bed earlier. So not only did I wake up 1.5 hour earlier, I also went to bed 1.5 hour earlier. So the last evening I went to bed at 6 p.m. Or even 5:30 p.m. the last evening in Monaco. And you have to then also put blackout glasses, so completely blacked out glasses, so you see really a minimum amount, because that allows for the melatonin to not be stopped, because it's the eyes seeing light that stops melatonin production. So you put the blackout glasses 2 hours before your actual bedtime. So the last day, my bedtime is 6 p.m. My blackout glasses went on at 4 p.m. So you'd see me running around with the full blackout glasses, which is coincidentally the kind of approach that I see George Russell doing now in life, lifestyle design, around Formula One, which is really, really cool to see. He's also someone who's dedicating himself to all of these marginal improvements. And that's resulting in his amazing performance at the moment. And I was definitely trying to maximize that. And when I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning here in Monaco, I also had a 10,000 lux screen glaring. So first thing I would do, so alarm goes 2 a.m. And the first thing I do is go into the bathroom and stare into this 10,000 lux thing right into it to again tell the body, okay, it's morning time, let's go. So it's all these tools. And the final piece of the puzzle is the flight schedule. So we always made sure that there was no layovers in the critical sleep time moments, so the whole flight schedule was also done accordingly to this 1.5 hour step in transition. And I really did the whole season. I did the whole season with 0.0 jet lag, traveling the whole world. You know how crazy it is. Never had jet lag. And it changed my life. This was amazing.
It doesn't work with kids, does it, Ted? Doesn't work with you. There's no way we could do that. Would be, school run here, school run there.
Possibly incompatible with a family life when you're not going for the championship. But it worked for you, Nico. So thank you very much for telling us about that. Yeah. Right. How did you know, Nico, that the thing in the back of your selfie once again was going to be race critical?
That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy, right? Because I was like, what on earth are you guys talking about? Stop it. There's not even a car or a person. There's not even a car or a person in my selfie here. And then there's actually the exact spot where Lando impacts the wall. Oh my goodness, that's pretty nuts. So what's the lesson? I'm gonna do a selfie in future with, I don't know, just in a room or something where there's nothing. But at least I'll say at the bottom, I am actually at the race, but I'm just doing it in a room to protect everybody.
Yeah, no, you took one with me. So if I spontaneously combust, I'll know it's down to you. You actually made a good point. Let's get on to George and the way that he's driving. Ted, I'll come to you on this one, because if you give him a well-balanced car, George is he's the full package now. He's so mentally tough. I really am enjoying this sort of pantomime act between himself and Max. They're actually really nice to each other in the cool down room. But the fact that George was saying after qualifying, trying to get in his head and saying, I've got a few more penalty points to play with. And then we'll come on to the protest and the unsportsmanlike intent that Red Bull were lobbying for in a couple of moments' time. But let's just get into Mercedes weekend. As you quite rightly pointed out, they ran that rear suspension that they tried in Imola and it didn't work. But these were really, really hot temperatures, and it was still a really good car. Well, it was a good car, I should say, perhaps, or the strongest it's been this year. So what are we to read into that, if anything?
Well, the way it was explained to me was that with Mercedes, it's the surface temperature where they are good on the tires. If it's a bulk tire temperature, like circuits that affect that, like Spain, I suppose, or like Bahrain, when the bulk of the tires McLaren are great at keeping that under control, but when it's just surface temperature, and at Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, Nico, the tyre has a chance to cool off on the surface temperature, then actually that's sort of Mercedes territory. First win since Las Vegas, so it shows that he can do it. Resisted the pressure of Verstappen, stretched his legs once he was clear of the traffic, didn't look under any kind of danger of losing it to Verstappen, and delivered. Yeah, so it was a good weekend. I'm just wondering whether you think, after kind of losing the battle in Abu Dhabi last year, after George's "I've lost all respect for Max," and I think the sort of solution, the kind of wisdom was that when you go up in a war of words against Max in that way, it's difficult to win. And so what George has done is kind of step back from that, but is still using that kind of rivalry. And it's all kind of tied up in that Qatar argument before, when Max said, "I've never seen somebody try to have someone over on a penalty so much as what George did to me." I think this is all carrying on from that, really. And George has realized that, okay, it's part of the game. I'm not gonna badmouth him anymore, saying that he's lost respect for him, because I'm not going to win that. But they'll try anyway to get themselves in amongst it, get
But
disadvantage or advantage each other.
But it happened again in Montreal, because under the safety car, Max was being cheeky and trying to go right next to George, which you don't like that as a driver, when you see this guy trying to make himself really big next to you, like it feels like he's trying to add pressure. And so George slammed the brakes. He slammed the brakes and made Max overshoot him. So Max actually overtook him. And I've never seen someone be so fast on the radio button. So Max overshoots him by a meter. George is instant. He probably had his thumb on the radio button already. So he's instant on the radio button. Max just overtook me. Max just overtook me. You need to check that out. So the games continued, didn't they, in Montreal? And it's lovely for us to watch that. And I think I think it's great how George is standing up to it, and he keeps on pushing up against it. I don't think you can be really good friends in that case when something like that just continues and continues all the time. I think they have a decent respect still towards each other, but you can't be friends when something like that keeps going on. And in fact, I think also the Red Bull, the fact that Red Bull then, how do you say, what do you say, appealed? The fact that Red Bull
Protested,
appealed,
yeah.
the fact that Red Bull appealed, it wouldn't surprise me if that was pushed by Max, because Max got angry that George hit the brakes and tried to get him into a penalty situation. So Max was like, "I'm not having that. Let's asking his team to appeal to try and get him into George in trouble." It wouldn't surprise me, So we're seeing the cat and mouse games continue, which is great.
Well, Toto actually said he didn't think that Max would do that because he's a pure racer. But what Red Bull did do, didn't they, after qualifying and George's comments, I think they went to race director, to Rui Marquez, and they said, "Look, just watch out for this, because we think that everyone's going to try dirty tactics to try to get Max banned for a race, because that would particularly hurt his chances if indeed he's still got a chance of winning the title in 2025." But the whole point is, it took 5 hours. So the protest that was lodged against Car 63 by Red Bull is that they breached Article 55.5 of the F1 sporting regulations by braking unnecessarily and driving erratically behind the safety car. And then 12.2.1 of the International Sporting Code, whereby complaining about driver one overtaking behind the safety car, that showed unsportsmanlike intent, which kind of a bit of pot kettle black, you might suggest, from these ones. But actually, if you go all the way back to Abu Dhabi 2021, I think one of the two protests that was thrown out by the stewards was Mercedes. I mean, there's a lot more at stake, wasn't there? But Mercedes complaining that Max Verstappen had overtaken behind the safety car, and nothing came of that one. So we get all these shenanigans all the time, but it meant that a couple of people missed flights. Toto Wolff's called it embarrassing. Christian saying that it's just acting pragmatically. They saw something wrong. Why not try it? But it does seem like a bit of an unnecessary faff, doesn't it, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, two things on this. First of all, I think this is all a carryover from Red Bull feeling aggrieved that Max tried his best. Qatar last year, that George tried his best to get Max a penalty, and did. and they're like, well, have a bit of this back. Secondly, Red Bull are rightly concerned that if Max does get a silly penalty for nothing, then they could have gone to their home race in Austria with just Yuki Tsunoda and, say, for example, Isaac Hadjar or Liam Lawson. And Yuki isn't exactly knocking it out the park at the moment. And as our co-host Bernie Collins says, when Max isn't driving the car, often that Red Bull is only the 8th, 9th, or sometimes 10th quickest car in Formula One. So when Max isn't driving the Red Bull, it's not a quick car, either in Yuki's hands, Liam's hands, or we don't know what, Isaac's hands. So seeing that, and the weird thing for me, thirdly, the race was done. It was not going to restart. I think all the drivers knew that. And so George wasn't really in a sort of position to think about, well, I need to keep my tires warm. So then the games could carry on. And then I think the Red Bull were nervous about there being a look at whether he had overtaken George under the safety car, but he hadn't fully overtaken him, so that was okay. But I think Red Bull's point of view, the best form of defense was attack in that moment, and so they attacked George with the unsportsmanlike intent, maybe to get it in before the stewards had a point. But Red Bull were properly discussing it. They were really, they were on the pit wall with Christian Horner, with their rules guy, with Raymond Vermeulen, with Helmut Marko. After the race, they were properly thinking about, we're going to have a think about protesting this, because in their mind, it was clear what George was doing, and that he hadn't stayed within the requisite length of space behind the safety car. Whereas I asked Ron Meadows at Mercedes, I said, are you going to take this to the stewards at all? And it's like, no, we haven't got a problem. We haven't got a problem with Max overtaking us a bit under the safety car. Mercedes didn't have a problem with it at all. Maybe it's because they just won.
Gave it back anyway. That's the whole point. And they were just saying he was saying that for context, just to point it out. But there was no, because he gave it back, there was no problem there. So there we are. But it finished under the safety car, which is a shame. I think there were a bit of talk that one of the reasons he slammed it on was because the safety car was driving so slowly, because they wanted to try to get one racing lap in. It goes all the way back again. Jacques Villeneuve made the point: should they red flag it and then give us the opportunity to finish it under green flags and not under the safety car? Because it denied us at the end, didn't it? What we hope would be a good one.
That's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. Perhaps if there's a risk of it finishing under safety car, to red flag it and give us some racing, because it's really always the biggest letdown, isn't it, when a race finishes under safety car? We hate that. So that could be something, an idea to explore. How can one what can one do to give us racing to the end? Yeah, that would be nice.
Quick one on Kimi Antonelli, Nico, before we go to the break. It started slowly, built into the weekend. Nice little Father's Day present for Marco, who was there. First podium, third youngest podium sitter in the history of Formula One, behind Max and Lance Stroll. So, great weekend for him.
Yeah, I can just remind that Kimi drove in my go-karting team, so I know what kind of a generational talent he is. He's one of he can be of the level of Verstappen and Hamilton, because that was his speed in go-karting. And so it was lovely to see him. It's because also for a young driver, also mentally, it's so important, these milestones, that, okay, you can see, wow, yes, I can do it. I can be on the podium in F1. And especially after a couple of difficult weekends that he had really rough 3 weekends in a row. He had really rough 3 weekends in a row before that. So that was awesome. He's still missing a little bit in qualifying. His race pace seemed to be really strong also on Sunday, because he was always there. He was always really on it, really close to Max. So race pace was cool, because it's a very, very difficult race, Canada. It's super, super hard to keep your concentration, keep the tires in good shape. It's a very, very hard race. So that was cool to see. He's still missing something in qualifying, which is surprising to me, because he's only once so far on one lap this whole year shown like the brilliant pace that we kind of think that he's capable of. And that was just Miami. Never, ever elsewhere have we seen the brilliant pace. So that I hope he can somehow very quickly find some more there. But we know at the same time, he's up against one of the top 2, 3 of this generation currently in F1 on one lap, which is George Russell. So it's of course, it's a extremely hard benchmark, but still, I would like to see a little bit more there.
Just finally, before the break, though, George Russell contract situation, doing everything he needs once again. Do we think that is going to, materialize before the summer break, or do we think that it's already done, or where do we think this leaves him, Ted?
Yeah, Toto last night was saying to Craig Slater that it's time over the next couple of races at Austria and Silverstone to have a sit down with George. Is Toto sure that Max is off the market? Does he know whether Max is going to come on the market at the end of 2026? Will it be a multi-year deal with George Russell? I suppose those are all options to be sort of, details to be ironed out. But yeah, it looks like George will certainly be there for next year. But do we really think that George, having won the race, was thinking, okay, job done, I've won the race, it's not going to be restarted, now time to get Max a penalty?
No.
Ted, when you're in safety car and you see Max Verstappen being cheeky and trying to make you nervous by making himself really big right next to you in that mirror, in the exact spot where the mirror is facing. You don't like that. It really annoys you as a driver. Like really properly, like deeply annoys you. And so it's only from there, it's quite natural to say, you know what, take this, you sucker. So yes, he did want to hit the brakes and give one back to Max there.
Okay, all right.
There we are. That's how it looks from inside the cockpit. It's great insight. But there we are. Nothing made of it, thrown out, and the result stands. Right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, as promised, we'll discuss the F1 movie. Get Mark Commode, our version of Mark Commode, talking about it, having seen it at the press screening. We'll review that, talk about Luca de Mare, and some of the other stories as well from Canada, including Ferrari. Quick word on our show partner, Audi. The philosophy of Audi Sport isn't just about winning races. It's about pushing boundaries. Everything learnt on the track goes straight into Audi's road cars, making them just as thrilling as they are refined. Take the Audi RS range. Serious performance, but with a level of sophistication and refinement that doesn't need to be loud to make a statement. It's that perfect blend of power and precision wrapped in quiet luxury. Whether it's their powerful style or the RS Sport suspension with Quattro all-wheel drive for razor-sharp handling, Audi is constantly redefining the future of performance. Book a test drive today to experience the Audi RS range for yourself. Welcome back to the F1 Show podcast, sponsored by Audi. Let's wrap up some of the other stories from the weekend in Canada and start with Ferrari, and also send our condolences to the deceased groundhog, RIP groundhog, that poor old Lewis Hamilton ran over. It cost him 20 points of downforce. So there's a reason for it. I mean, Lewis was traumatized by it. He wasn't happy, was he? He didn't like hitting that groundhog, but it's one of the occupational hazards of where we are at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. What do we make, Nico, of Ferrari's weekend? Charles Leclerc in fifth, ruined his Friday, then got caught in the dirty hair of Hadjar, but built back in to finish fifth, and Lewis Hamilton in sixth. Could they, I suppose, have tried the one stop? Is the thing hanging over Ferrari's weekend?
Yeah, Ferrari. We got to remember that Charles Leclerc was quick at times in the race. He was very quick. He was keeping up with the McLarens very nicely. He was quick in qualifying. Some say he could have been top 3 in qualifying, right up there with the others. But I think was he on a medium? No, he was on a soft, right? I think they also did a wrong tire choice in qualifying. So they did a lot of strategy mistakes there, because then also in the race they stopped Lewis into a bunch of traffic, which lost him like loads of race time. And they had a free opportunity to try a one stop with Charles. It was a free opportunity. And they didn't try to do it because behind there was just Lewis and loads of space. Like there was nobody there. And they could have taken a shot at it and left him out on that first stint in the first place, because he was going strong, and they just pulled him in really early, in that first stint, which he was also a bit annoyed about because he wanted to stay out longer. So yeah, it wasn't. It was a bit of a clumsy weekend from Mercedes, from Ferrari, and then also bad luck with the groundhog. So it all came together, which yeah, it's not good. It's like the story of their year so far, isn't it? It just keeps on going like that. It's a tough one for them.
At a weekend when they really needed a big result, a podium would have silenced some of the voices coming out of Italy. And Leclerc, that was his mistake. You could argue that there were more strategic errors that Nico's were talking about. But really, the quote for me of the weekend was Lewis after qualifying, which he said, "Look, we just have to understand that we are way off at the moment at Ferrari. We're way off being a team. We've got a lot of issues we need to fix, a lot of changes, both in the car and in the operational way that we go racing." And I said this on the notebook at the time, saying that what we already knew, all right, they finished second in last year's constructors, but they have gone backwards this year, and they do have structural changes to the organization that maybe need fixing, whether that's the team boss. Some people in Ferrari seem to think so. I don't. But they're far off being a championship team at the moment.
So I've seen a little bit of inner workings there at Ferrari, and you can see that just some of the things, the level of excellence that they're at is not comparable to the British teams, and especially to someone like Mercedes in many areas, whether it goes from marketing to other areas. So you can just see the whole culture, the fact that they're in Italy, it makes it a lot more difficult to them. And I think also Lewis is like, for example, at Mercedes, Lewis, whenever Lewis had a thing, he would just go to Toto, and Toto would be able to make the decision, call the shot, immediately done. Whereas at Ferrari, there's like so many different decision makers. There's so many different decision makers at Ferrari, and even Lewis doesn't really know, like, okay, if I ask him and he says yes and he does it, and the other guy still complains afterwards, it's all a bit difficult there. And there's a couple of ideas that I heard also going around, like I think Ferrari has been exploring to perhaps open a kind of subsidiary in the UK, because that's where the F1 ecosystem is. So I've heard rumors that they're also thinking about opening a subsidiary there. The problem then again is just getting the communication right. If you do have an entity, a Ferrari entity in the UK, that's one thing, but it still needs to communicate awesomely with the headquarters, and then maybe that's not possible to get the communication that good that actually makes sense. So they're facing all these kind of questions, because there must be a reason why they're just year in, year out. They haven't won a world championship since 2007, if I'm not mistaken, or 8, whatever the year was. They would have to really look at some fundamental things. What is going wrong? Why are they not able to challenge the best?
Yeah, 2007 for Kimi Räikkönen, 2008 for the last constructors for them. But I actually does open up the question, because you talk about that, about having everything under one roof. When you talk to Andy Cowell about his time at HPP and Mercedes, one of the strengths in the turbo hybrid era, you know, that is that they were effectively, everything was tied in and under one roof. Now Aston Martin, and I suppose it leads us on to a very good weekend for Fernando Alonso, but they're going to be faced with that challenge too, in that they've got Honda over in Japan and the big factory, the brand new spanking factory in Silverstone for Aston. But Fernando finished 7th. He loves Canada. You require so much precision around that track. If you just discussed there, Nico, last 3 races in a row, he's qualified in the top 6. They look now potentially like the 5th quickest car, and certainly on average they are since Imola, moving slightly in the right direction. But then you look on the other side of the garage, and Lance Stroll has one of those weekends, a bit of a mystery. I'd love to know what's going on there with the wrist. He got a penalty in the race. He qualified way down, and it was kind of an anonymous weekend, wasn't it, for him at his home Grand Prix? So we're looking at another team at the moment, a little bit like Red Bull, and they've got one driver who is pushing the car to the limit, and the other one, unfortunately, is the owner's son who isn't. What do you think of what's going on at Aston, Ted, Nico?
I think it's okay. I mean, Fernando's now got the points rolling and is just going to sort of carry on. They need some upgrades, which we don't know when they're going to happen. But Lance had an unfortunate one. And when you have a 10-second stop-go penalty after causing a collision, which Lance served in the middle of the race, then really you're not going to score any points. Can I just go back to something you said, Simon, on, or Nico said on Ferrari, which ties in with Aston Martin. I mean, obviously Aston Martin, they don't have the engine under the same roof, but they will go to, they'll get a Honda next year. That will be a split. But they are in the UK, where they can take advantage of all the sort of centre of excellence. I can understand two things on Ferrari. First of all, Toro Rosso, whatever they're called these days, Racing Bulls, they're setting up a design and development and mechanics base in Red Bull technology in the UK.
Yeah.
They're based in Italy, but they're setting it up in the UK. So that will be a good test case as to whether it can work. With remote working is much easier. But where Ferrari tried this back in the late 80s and 90s was with Ferrari Design and Development in Guildford under John Barnard. And because they didn't have the technology of being able to work remotely the way that they have now, it was a bit of a disaster. And that's why maybe some people with long memories are thinking that maybe it's not great to split a sort of UK-based part of Ferrari, but there's no reason, as Nico says now, with the way modern communications are, that it couldn't work. But that would be sort of a big call for them to do. But with Aston, I think they just have to keep going. Ferrari say they're going to have an upgrade. Maybe we should judge Ferrari after their big upgrade in Austria and Silverstone, that maybe fixes some of the hopes to fix some of the issues at the back of the car.
Nico, tell us about Aston. Come on, I'd love to know your thoughts on it, because you've obviously got a double world champion in one side of the garage, and Lance, who started the season well but has kind of like fallen away a little bit. What do you think of things going on?
Well, I always think that then Fernando is driving at his very, very best, which we know Fernando sometimes, even with cars that are not so good, can do incredible things. And it looks to me a bit like that. And then on the other hand, just Lance, who's just still struggling with that car. And it's a horrible situation to be in, something like that. And especially then, even more so when you're the son of the owner, that just makes the whole dynamic, it's difficult internally, and difficult for him also. So I don't know what the solution is, apart from him continuing to really do his best, work hard, be in the simulator, because that will go a long way with the team if they see that he's at the very least trying so damn hard. That's going to be important for him at this point. And okay, that's that. And then on the Honda, I mean, Adrian Newey already has done that work with Honda being at a distance. So Adrian Newey, so actually from that point of view, they're well placed, because it's a workflow that Adrian has already been doing for all the years. So that's great. So that should help. And therefore, I really think that can be a great success. Adrian is still the best of all time as a car designer. And he's hit the ground running. I hear stories of him again being on his drawing board, and all the Aston aerodynamicists with their mouths open following him drawing on the drawing board with the pencils, which is incredible. They have all their computers open with teraflops of computing power and data, and he's in front just drawing. That's unbelievable.
It's funny enough. The great F1 illustrator, Giorgio Piola, when you speak to him, who's up and down the pit lane, and his things are a work of art, and still traces and draws them all, illustrates everything freehand. He said of all the designers that he's ever met that could draw better than him, it was Adrian, or as good as him, it was Adrian. Whereas people like Ross Brawn, brilliant technically, but they couldn't draw anything freehand. Can we doff our caps, please, by the way, whilst we're here? Just final couple of stories from on the grid to Nico Hulkenburg. As we've discussed him before, we know what a great driver he is. It's good to see him in sort of semi-competitive machinery again, and that Sauber is improving. If you look at by the way, just operationally, look at all the pit stops. I think it's something like 8 of the 10 quickest ones have been Ferrari. So whilst they might not have sorted their strategy out, they sorted their pit stops out. But the other two, Sauber. Jonathan Wheatley's there. Mattia Bonotta's there. All of a sudden, they're moving in the right direction. You can tell us a little bit, Nico, if you want, about Nico Hulkenburg, because he's got that one pole position, but he's still never finished on a podium. It would be great, wouldn't it, if Audi could give him some competitive machinery? Because I'd love to see him at the front battling it out. He's more than capable, isn't he?
But you're right. They have Red Bull senior leadership. They have ex-Ferrari senior leadership, Mattia Binotto. That's a lot of experience that they have there now, and it seems that they are already able to implement some of their learnings to help that car go faster. Because even Mattia knows some of the important things that Ferrari has done to manage the tires and tire temperatures, bulk, surface. It's something that he would be pretty quickly able to teach the Sauber team, right? So it seems that they're really making progress, which is great. Gives a little bit of hope for that Audi project, which until as of late it was like we're all a bit like, oh my god, that's not looking very good. But it gives them a little bit of hope. And then Nico Hulkenburg, yeah, fantastic driving he's been doing, really amazing. He's always been he was a generational talent coming through, just like an Oscar Piastri or George Russell, because just like them, he also won everything. He won Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2. He was like unstoppable. And somehow he's underperformed a little bit in F1. A part of that is social intelligence or emotional intelligence or whatever was not his absolute strength. So he pissed off a little bit a few people back in the day, which did hurt his career progression. And then somehow also in terms of performance, like he was up against Daniel Ricciardo at Renault, and Daniel beat him. Sometimes something just came a bit short there, and I don't know if it's because he maybe doesn't do well enough on the technical side, because as a driver it doesn't matter how talented you are, if you're not able to set the car up perfectly to your needs time and time again, you'll not be able to perform well. So that's an element where maybe he's not as good there or something. It's difficult to understand. Anyways, now he's doing brilliantly, and it would be crazy if after that career where he's never been on the podium, he would now suddenly get a podium where he was very close even with Sauber in Barcelona, finishing fifth, which is amazing. And if he would get it without, he would be a super kind of twilight of the career results. So let's wish it for him.
Now, as we were on air, it broke that Luca De Meo, who's the CEO of the Renault Group, is leaving. He's going to become the CEO of Kering, which is the holding company, high-end luxury fashion. So at least he's going to be well dressed from now on. He probably was anyway. He's an Italian. They own who do they own? Yves Saint Laurent, Gucci, Alexander McQueen. However, and we talked about this, didn't we, with Ollie Oakes when he left a while back? Perhaps the problems at Renault could be traced back to the higher levels of management. So since he took over in 2020, we've had Marcin Budkowski, Otmar, Bruno Famin, Ollie Oakes, and now no team principal, but we've got Flavio Briatore there. What's going on? I mean, what I'm hearing is that he was a bit of a sacker, wasn't he? He liked to sack people, and perhaps what they require is stability. It's a strange situation they find themselves in, and is there any coincidence that he's left whilst they're plumb last?
Yeah, I mean, we know how important stability is for the performance of a team. It's one of the weaknesses of Ferrari also, who've had a lack of stability as well, changing a lot of leadership positions all the time in the last years. Compared with like someone like Mercedes, where if I walk into Mercedes today, the leaders from my time 15 years ago are still there in most of the key roles. It's like it's really awesome to see that continuity, and at the same time, there's young talent coming through as well to complement. So. Yeah, and Alpine. Yeah, I mean, you need to, like when I was at Mercedes and we were driving around like last place, they were almost going to pull the plug every weekend because they're paying a lot of money and it's anti-marketing. It's marketing that is damaging the brand of Alpine and Renault if you're just driving around in last place. And also in the face of the challenging environment for the automotive industry, where sales are plummeting, the shift to e-mobility is a struggle. The Chinese are coming and conquering more and more market share. Tesla is taking market share. The first thing that you cut is marketing budget, and marketing. The F1 team falls under marketing budget. So we need to keep an eye on that now with new leadership, whether he's pro F1 or against F1. but a difficult situation. At the same time, I think Flavio he will always be an awesome CEO. So I think he's going to be doing a great job for them in the short term, because he knows how to judge people. He knows how to position people. Let's remember, he came from the fashion business, and he was the guy who bet heavily on Michael Schumacher right from the get-go. He developed the high conviction, wow, Michael Schumacher, generational talent, and he was like a fashion industry guy. Flavio Briatore, so he has an amazing eye for talent, and so I think from that point of view, they're in a good position with him now.
But Ted, I mean, Flav was Luca's man. I just want to read you something here from Informe or L'Informe, which is a publication from France that specializes in investigating an economic and financial world. And he's stating that, Briatore is getting 2 million euros in fixed compensation, which is more than De Meo, but also gets a 20% share in all sponsorship deals he brings to the team. Previously, such commissions were not allowed. Other well-placed sources say that Briatore is paid 4 million euros a year without commissions. Whatever the case, it's not helping. This is being printed, De Meo, because De Meo was the one directly responsible for putting Flav in place. It was nothing to do with the board of Renault. So I just wonder where it leaves Flav now. I mean, is he in a position? He doesn't want to be team principal, does he? What's he going to do without support from above? I mean, there's any chance that the incoming CEO of the Renault Group is going to support him like De Meo?
Why do you say he doesn't want that? Why do you say he doesn't want that? I think he loves it.
No, well, maybe he does, but I mean, the man that appointed him is now gone. But Flavio appears, he's the man in position, and he's the man in power now, it would seem.
But I mean, Flavio will say, look, this isn't going to cost you. This doesn't have to cost Renault anything. Formula One does not have to cost any holding company anything. With the budget cost, with the budget cap and the prize money, all right, they're last in the constructors at the moment. And, it can be cost neutral. And so with the sponsorship from BWT and all these other sponsors that Alpine has, if we keep costs under control, and Flavio says that, I keep bringing in the sponsors with or without a commission, I don't know whether that's true or not, then it can be cost neutral. And then it's up to, he'll hope that he can convince the new CEO, who he would hope to still be an advisor to, whoever that is, that he would continue to keep the F1 thing going. Is it going to keep being called Alpine because they want to promote their sporty brand? That's up for discussion. Is it better to be called Renault? And they're on the cusp of maybe a better 2026 because they're going to have the Mercedes power unit. So I think they'd be well advised, the Renault Group, just to sort of hold on, see what happens in 2026, and then make a group decision after that. But it's not impossible they can sell the team because, as you know, Simon, there are buyers out there who are looking.
There are buyers out there now. I'm not saying this could be the case, but we know that there's a couple of people. Well, one man looking to be a 12th team. I actually spoke to Otmar Safnauer, by the way, this morning before this podcast with regards to his team, his perceived 12th team. They've got significant financial backing in North America. He says that they'd quite easily be able to raise. It's going to be roughly about $1 billion if you want to start a new team because of the 500 to 700 million dilution fee that you're going to have to pay, plus about 300 million to start up a team. He says he's got backing from an OEM, very credible, familiar with racing, and they've raced in other series in the past. So, I mean, I'll leave you to do your sleuth-like investigations on that. But I just wonder, actually, I'm not necessarily he would do that, but if they wanted to, they could sell. It's a good time to sell if you were Renault, isn't it? I mean, everyone's making money in this cost cap era, Nico.
Yeah. I mean, Ted is right that we wouldn't now with them finishing last in the constructors. I think they would actually lose a bit of money, and the problem is the return on investment is negative because it's negative marketing to be last. It's bad for any brand to be last in sports. So that's something which they will be considering. Yeah.
Nico, thanks for joining us. I know you've got to drop out. Thanks, mate. Appreciate you joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Right then, Ted, we weren't in New York City. We're here in our offices and spare rooms.
I know.
So we missed out.
They had a great time. Do you want to show the picture? Should we show the picture?
You can show, I mean, the picture of Brad with Crofty and Martin, Slats was there. What a
I'll,
shame. Maybe we'll go to the London one. Who
I'll,
knows?
I'll hold
But
up the picture, but we'll show it full frame because Crofty has what a picture that is.
Lifetime
What a
Ambition, the
picture.
three big stars
The
of the
three
movie.
big stars and Times Square. Bless them. That is fantastic.
One bigger than
Look
the
at
other
Crofty.
two.
He's so happy.
One literally, one metaphorically. Yeah, let's talk about it. You saw it. You went to the press screening on Thursday, wasn't it, in Montreal? It's got some really rave reviews following the premiere, by the way. I was looking online this morning, and there's not a bad word to say about it. What did you think?
No, it's great. So, you're going to see, everybody watching is now going to see, because the embargo is Tuesday evening here in the UK, lunchtime in the US. So you're now going to see all of the reviews, and I've got to say it's absolutely terrific. They've really achieved. It's quite long. It's over 2 hours. But you don't notice that either as a Formula One fan, or if you go with your family members or friends who aren't Formula One fans. It holds the interest. It looks spectacular, not only with the racing sequences, which are filmed at Top Gun Maverick level and better, because of course Joseph Kosinski directed that Top Gun sequel, but also the stylized stuff. I mean, there's a scene in a laundrette at the beginning, which just looks fantastic, where Javier Bardem comes and finds the sort of nomadic Brad Pitt and convinces him to join his failing Apex team. The opening sequence at the Daytona 24 Hours is spectacular as well. So that's a real nice surprise early on, that we get this sort of other racing series. There's a very well considered backstory with a sort of bit of Formula One history to explain Brad Pitt's backstory as to why he's kind of this nomadic racer that goes between series, and Javier Bardem, the team owner, has to kind of convince him to come and give Formula One another go to get him out of trouble, alongside Damson Idris. And then it's just full of great characters. Not only do you have, Bardem, you've got his sort of Piranha Club investor, Tobias Menzies. And then you've got the pit crew as well. You've got the team boss, the kind of Toto Wolff sort of Fred Vasseur figure, who's Kim Bodnia, who played Constantin in Killing Eve, and he's terrific. You've got the technical director Kerry Condon, who's brilliant in anything she does, and from the Banshees of Inisherin to the F1 movie, she's pretty much playing the same character, which is
hold on.
Smart.
But this character, her character, is based on our fellow sort of based on our fellow podcaster Bernie, and Bernie's the love interest. I keep telling her you're the love interest.
I mean, she's not only the strategist, but also the technical director and the designer. So it's a kind of hybrid Bernie Collins that she's based on. But even then, she's strong in terms of telling the drivers what to do, coordinating with the pit crew. So she's a kind of multifaceted role. Is the character of Kate that Kerry Condon plays. So pleased they let her do it in her sort of original Bernie Collins, style Irish, that it's just brilliant. That's why I say it's not dissimilar to Kerry's Siobhan Sullivan, her character, her strong character in Banshees of Inisherin. It's like, you're all boring, was I never wild? It's like, it's the same one. It's great. She's like, you have to understand. Very good pit crew, actually, showing the pressures of the engineers and then the pit crew as well. Because like pretty much in every Formula One team now, there's a female mechanic character who's struggling to make sure that she's well represented and delivers in her role. There's a very good character in there as well, and it looks fantastic. Damson Idris is brilliant. Sort of sparkles every time he's on there. His manager Samson Kao is very good. His mum Sarah Niles is excellent as well. Whenever they cut to their flat, it seems to be in sort of Hackney Wick on the overground line, and they sort of let the orange overground trains rumble past, and then they kind of shout action, and then which is quite funny. And there are all sorts of little Easter eggs in there. There's a shot
No,
of
hold
Ayrton
on. Too
Senna.
many no spoilers. No spoilers. No spoilers
No
though. Right.
spoilers.
Okay.
There's a little bit a reference to Rusty, Brad's character in the Ocean's films that you'll have to watch out for. And its heart is in the right place. The action is fantastic. The characterization is great. There is a little bit with Stefano Domenicali at the end and Toto Wolff, so sort of bring some of the characters in it from Formula One. None of the drivers speak, interestingly, not even Lewis Hamilton, who's a co-producer. There is some advertising in there that some people might find irritating, but hey, what is Formula One if not full of advertising and products? But yeah, I loved it. It was really good, really, really good.
So what are you giving it? How many stars out of 5?
Well, definitely 4.5.
4.5 stars.
Yeah, definitely 4.5. But
Is that half a star missing because of Crofty's performance?
No,
Or
no,
is
no.
I mean, Crofty? I heard Crofty is exceptional with his drama O level in this, and he's thoroughly embraced being a movie star, and we're going to have to cope with that over the next few weeks,
Hey,
which
listen,
will be
he's in
interesting in
large
itself.
parts. He's in large parts of the film, as is Martin, and they do a good
Yeah.
job explaining. It's very difficult, the job they've got to do, because not only do they have to do the commentary, but they have to explain bits. They have to explain safety car and virtual safety car, essentially, to the audience, which we struggle to do at the best of times. But when you're having to do it, we're going to have to explain it to my 14-year-old daughter, who's going to need to go and understand why there's an element of the plot that involves the safety car and how that impacts what Apex Grand Prix are doing with Damson and Brad. That's quite difficult. You might have seen from the trailer as well, there's a sort of fiery moment. So, that's not difficult to work out that they've gone with the Grosjean story and developed that. So they've taken key moments from recent F1 history that people will be aware of. And perhaps the greatest achievement is melding and interwinding the Apex cars into race events that we saw happen in 2023, which is the year that they were competing. That's amazing how they've managed to do that, whether it's like a Gasly spin-off or something else. The Apex cars are in there and they've taken advantage. So they would have had to watch the races and think, okay, right, we're going to take this, we're going to use it in part of our plot, and then that's going to change the Apex story as to how they do well or don't. I won't spoil it anymore. But yeah, absolutely terrific.
Brilliant. Well, I'm lining up the sequel already. It's fantastic. Yeah,
Well,
the reviews are great.
We did. I asked Jerry Bruckheimer in the press conference in Canada. I said, I know it's a bit early for this, but is there any chance of a sequel? And he said that's up to the audiences. If it gets good audiences and people go and see it and they want a sequel, then there could be sequels. But what are they going to call it? F2? F3?
F1-2.
F1-2.
That'll be F12.
F12.
Yeah, that'd be a hard one. Maybe they just keep it like that and then have a tagline.
Exactly.
All right, that's about us. Well done, Ted. Appreciate it. Thanks to Nico, who's scuttled off. And we shall see you in a couple of weeks' time. Next up is Austria. But from us all here at the pod, ta-ta.